Hey there, my wedding planning friends, and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, thanks so much for clicking on my video. I'm Emily Summer. I'm a wedding planner based in Montana, and I make weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice. In today's video, we're talking all about catering and the questions you should be asking your caterer during the planning process. So this video is all about talking with your caterer during the planning process once you've already booked your caterer. If you're looking for something that's going to help you book a caterer and questions to ask during that process, I do have a couple other videos regarding that for you to check out there, where this video is going to focus on you've already booked your caterer and now what the next steps are to discuss with them during the planning process. And a lot of these might be questions that you do ask and probably should ask before you even book your caterer as well. But if you're watching this video and you already have your caterer and you just want to make sure that you're asking all of the right questions, then this one's for you. So number one, you want to determine what your style of catering is going to be. So this means, are you going to have a buffet? Are you going to have a plated meal? Are you going to have it served family style, food stations, whatever that might be? If you want to know a little bit more about what maybe the advantages and disadvantages of different wedding catering styles, again, I have a video on that as well that I'll link above, so you can check that out. But you definitely want to talk to your caterer about what the plan is here, whether you are going to have a buffet or a plated meal or one of those other catering options. Number two, how many staff members will be there? So sometimes in the planning process or in the booking process, you're just hiring kind of the catering service, and maybe you've talked through some menu items, but maybe not solidified the actual labor hours and how many staff will be there. And so you want to make sure that you're communicating this with your caterer and that you're communicating what your needs and expectations are, as well as they're communicating what they can provide to you. So if you're having, especially if you're having a plated meal, it's a given that there's going to be staff there, right? They're going to have staff members that will serve the plated meals. However, sometimes with a buffet, you have the option to have staff or not. And so whether this is a served buffet or a self-serve buffet, or maybe it's a buffet and they just have one or two people, but that means there likely aren't going to be people there that are going to serve as servers at your wedding. So are you going to have people there that are going to be able to serve water, pour water if you have water glasses on the table? Are they going to be clearing the tables at the end of the night? These are the questions to be asking your caterer, and make sure that your expectations and your needs are being met and that they are able to meet those needs. Another thing to discuss is whether the flatware, plates, glassware, all of the table setting items are do they come from the caterer, or is that something you have to rent through a third party? Most caterers will provide some type of place setting, and depending on the caterer, depending on the style of food you have, maybe they only have disposable options, and then you need to rent through a third party if you're wanting to have real china. So this is something to make sure you're communicating with and you understand what they're going to provide, as well as what you might need to be responsible of renting. On this same topic, kind of similar to what we talked about before, if there's going to be people there to bus the tables and clean up at the end of the night. If they're not providing the table settings and the rental items, make sure that if you are renting them third party and you have people there that are going to be on staff to bus the tables, that they will still manage these third party rentals. In my experience, I don't think I've ever run into a caterer that will not, but that's something to definitely make sure that you're communicating with them, let them know that there will be plates and rental items from another party, and that if they are busing the tables at the end of the night, that they will still be responsible for kind of clearing and packing up those dishware items. Number four, when do we have a menu tasting? So this is, a more fun part of the wedding planning, when you get to taste some yummy food, and communicating with your caterer early on if that's something that they provide, if it's included in, booking their services, and when that process typically happens, and if you get to choose the menu items and all of that. So, and that's something that you'll probably ask pretty quickly upon booking your caterer. Number five, what is the deadline to change menu items or the numbers? Most caterers will give you a time frame, typically 2 to 4 weeks before the wedding date, to submit your kind of final head count so that they know how much food to prepare, how much food to bring, and what to expect as far as guest count goes at your wedding. So make sure that you understand what that deadline is and that you are communicating any changes to your guest count or to your menu items well in advance of your wedding date and meeting that deadline that they provide for you. Number six, are you able to help with a champagne toast? This kind of goes hand in hand with how many staff members are going to be there, whether they're going to be available to provide water service, being there to kind of go around and just act as servers at your wedding. If you do plan on having a champagne toast, you need to make sure that there is somebody to pour the champagne. So if this is something that they don't provide, then if you are getting alcohol catering through another catering service, or if you're providing the alcohol yourself, you definitely want to have a plan for who's going to pour the champagne on the tables if you do plan to do a champagne toast. Another similar question that is often overlooked is, do you provide cake cutting service? So I have found that kind of 60-40 caterers will provide a cake cutting service. And so what this means is if you are having a cake at your wedding that you plan to cut and do your cake cutting ceremony and then cut and serve to all of your guests, somebody needs to be there to do this, right? You need somebody that is ideally has experience with this, as it's not as easy as it might seem. Make sure that they are there to cut every slice of cake, put it on a plate, and get it ready for guests to serve. A lot of times caterers will provide this, and it's just an extra service fee, so just make sure that you are asking if this is something they can provide and do so well in advance so that if it is not, you can find an alternative option. Number 8, what happens to any leftover food after the wedding? Typically, you're paying for any of the food that they're bringing, so you should be getting the leftovers at the end of the wedding, so just make sure you're communicating this with your caterer and understand what the plan might be after the wedding, if they're going to leave you the leftovers in a fridge on site, which, another thing to note, make sure you do have a place to store the leftovers if there are leftovers when the caterers leave, if you are still at your venue for a few hours afterwards, or have a family member or somebody that's in charge of packing those leftovers out at the end of the night. Number 9, how much time is needed for setup and when do you plan to arrive? So these are things that you'll be talking through towards getting closer to your wedding date as you're building out that day of timeline. And it's good to get an idea of when they plan to arrive, not only so you can know on your wedding day when to expect that or your wedding planner knows, but also a lot of times wedding caterers typically only need, an hour before dinner service, a couple hours before dinner service to arrive and set up. And so a lot of times this happens during your ceremony. And if your wedding ceremony, the logistics of your venue, you want to think through, if your wedding ceremony is going to be happening in a place where if a big catering vehicle, a van, a truck, a trailer, whatever it might be, is going to be driving right by your ceremony site, then you might want to tweak this arrival time a little bit so that they can arrive a little bit early so that they're there setting up before the ceremony so there's no distraction, or have them, wait until the ceremony is over to come up and then set up. So just something to think about there. And finally, what equipment, accessibility, etc. is needed to be able to perform their services. So do they need you to provide the buffet tables if you're having a buffet? Do they need you to provide the linens to cover these tables? Do they need electrical hookups close by? Those sorts of questions to make sure that they have everything they need to provide the service to you. So once you've booked your wedding caterer, there are 10 questions to ask them during the wedding planning process to make sure you are both on the same page and that you have a very well thought out plan for your wedding catering. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe to get weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice, and we'll see you next week.